Good morning, Hale-Ray. I'm Katrina Cesari, and I'm here with Jay Moreau, Senior Master Sergeant in the Air Force, Randall Rains, Mr. Rains' dad, Marines Captain, John Lang, Second Class Petty Officer in the Navy, and Leslie Williams, Navy spouse and an Air Force daughter. And today we will be talking about why you joined the military. So starting with you three, what time frames and what wars did you serve during?
I was 1983 until 2004 in the Air Force, active and Guard Reserve. And during Operation Iraqi Freedom was my last deployment, and also covering Bosnia and Operation Southern Watch in Kuwait.
I joined the Marines in 1971, got out in 1980. I served during the Vietnam era, but I think it's important to note that I was on the cutting edge of the sword of democracy, but I never had to use it.
I served from 1967 to 1973, 6 years of active duty during the Vietnam conflict, but I, once again, mostly saw around the United States, never saw anything beyond that.
And what time did your dad and husband serve in?
Well, my dad served before I was born, so I was born into it in 1972, and my husband served up until 2007. So.
Okay. And what age were you all when you joined?
I was 19.
And how old were you?
21.
I was 19.
And what was your main reason you decided to join the military?
I had started college at the University of Connecticut, and just didn't see that was where I wanted to be, and I thought I might get an education and a career in the service, and so I joined the Air Force for 4 years.
I was born in Birmingham, Alabama in 1949. It was the post-World War II era. It seemed like a natural progression that growing up around all these guys that had served, that when my turn came, I would serve as well.
And you?
When I had turned 19, back in 1967, the draft was in place, and if you didn't get a deferment for one reason or another, you would automatically get into the service. I was not the best high school student. I wasn't ready for college. I wanted to educate myself and become more mature before I did go to college. So when I did join the service, I did sign up for some of the top Navy schools that were available to me at the time. But I went into the service. Although I was accepted for college, I was accepted to UConn and some other colleges. I did want to get some time under my belt before I did go to college. And when I did get out of the service, the GI Bill did help me fund my college education, which was also important to me.
Mm-hmm. And when you met your spouse, what was his status regarding the military?
He was active duty as a corpsman in the Navy.
And why did you choose your specific job in the military?
I had a good friend who had been in the service and told me to make the most of my technical schools. So basically I chose something where I'd be working on airplanes that had the longer length schools, figuring that would be more education for me immediately. And so I picked 3 career fields in avionics, and that's how it began.
My father was a B-17 pilot during World War II, and his love of flying sort of rubbed off on me, except I wore glasses. So, you know, I picked a branch of the service that would allow me to be in jet airplanes wearing glasses.
And you?
Back in 1967, electronics was a relatively new and expanding field, and I wanted to get into that. My recruiter had told me that based on what he saw as far as test scores and everything else, that I would be able to get into that field. Except that's not always the way it works out. When I did finally get through boot camp, there was only one billet available for the field that I wanted, and I was not able to get that billet. So I got my second choice as an electrician, which I don't regret at all. It was a great field to be in, and it allowed me to get some of the education that I wanted. It allowed me to advance in rate at a relatively quick pace. So I was very pleased with it.
Mm-hmm. And what was your experience at the beginning of your enlistment? Very beginning.
The very beginning?
Yeah.
A plane ride from Bradley to San Antonio and Texas, and a bus ride, and lots of people yelling at you in the middle of the night, and freezing cold because it was December, and even in Texas that year was freezing. And wake up the next morning to garbage cans and lids being thrown around, and not being chastised, but being set in the military direction.
And you?
Well, we had similar experience. I think we all had similar experiences when we first reported for boot camp. My first duty station was Quantico, Virginia, where I attended infantry school and got to shoot machine guns and throw hand grenades and fire bazookas and, sort of play the games I had played as a little kid,
Mm-hmm.
I enlisted on the 20th of December, just before Christmas. We had a train ride. It was 22 and a half hours from New York to Chicago. So we did have a sleeper car, but it was the longest train ride I've ever had in my life. When we did get to boot camp, everyone had taken off for Christmas, so there was no one there to supervise us except a very skeleton crew. So for the first few days before Christmas, we spent our time on the floor folding our clothes over and over again, learning how to pack our locker very well, because basically there wasn't anything going on the first week before Christmas at boot camp.
A lot of very different experiences. That's interesting. And when you first met your husband, what was your experience like regarding military?
The only experience I had with the military was growing up by default. My dad was Air Force,
Mm-hmm.
so I moved around a lot. Every 2 to 3 years, we relocated, and then I went away to college. I fell in love and met my husband.
That's sweet. What were the different places you got to see during your service?
I started obviously in Texas, Mississippi, 2 years in Germany. I got to see all of Europe, spent 7 months in Spain, a month in Scotland, and then transitioned to Omaha, Nebraska in the States, and then back to England. I've been to Italy, Kuwait, other East Asia countries, and then all over the United States, Arizona, Vegas, Georgia, on deployments.
Well, we had similar experiences, except I went the other way. I traveled extensively or was stationed extensively in the United States, from New York City to Washington, D.C. to Pensacola, Florida, Yuma, Arizona, California, and then went to Westpac, Western Pacific, and transferred. I got put in with the infantry, and the infantry went to Hong Kong, Singapore, Jakarta, Bangkok, had a Tokyo. One of the true benefits of being in the service is being able to see places that you would never see if left up to you.
Being in the Navy, I was stationed on several ships, and those ships were ported in Kittery, Maine, Charleston, South Carolina, and Newport. But the ships traveled, so I got to see, because I was in the service fleet, which allowed me to stay mostly around the United States. So we would, our ship would pull into some interesting ports like Bermuda, St. Thomas, and Jamaica, Cuba. But we were also able to go to the West Coast. We'd go through the Panama Canal up the West Coast. We pulled into San Diego, San Francisco, etc. And we would also go out around Hawaii, flew into Hawaii several times. So as far as, and my last 2 years in the service, my last ship was stationed in Holyloch, Scotland. So I got to live for 2 years as a Scot before I finally got out of the service.
And what places did you move throughout your lifetime?
I'll say my time under my dad's service, which is the Air Force. I lived in Charleston, South Carolina. We lived in Abilene, Texas. We went to Europe, and over there we went to Germany, Italy, Netherlands, Belgium, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina. We moved quite a bit, and we ended up in Minot, North Dakota. On the Navy side, Guam, Connecticut, Texas, Georgia, it's a variety of places, so we moved around quite a bit.
And how did that affect your social life and education, moving around so often?
I became very adaptable to change, because we moved very frequently. And I also became aware that, you know, everywhere we went, there was a different culture, so everybody responded to things differently, even stateside, not necessarily just overseas. So you just become exposed to how people operate in their cultures, and you just kind of blend in, you learn how to blend pretty well.
Was it hard leaving your family when you enlisted and throughout your service?
When I enlisted, it wasn't that hard. I was a young teenage boy, but later on in my career, once I was married with children, yeah, it got hard to leave every time, especially as the durations got longer and longer.
What about you?
I was young and single for all of my active duty service. When I was in the reserves, we'd spend a couple of weeks away for for annual training. But it wasn't particularly difficult, except that the weather was usually bad and basement flooded and various things that could go wrong did when I was away.
I was also single, so for the 6 years I was in the service, it was wonderful. My time would be that I would invite my family over to the places that I would be stationed at, like especially in Scotland. I would have a place for them to stay and visit, and we would see Europe. We would travel to the continent while they were there. So, but going home on a regular basis, Christmas was always a home time, but beyond that, it wasn't difficult leaving home. Everybody knew I was going to be coming home for holidays and that kind of thing, so it wasn't really a stressful situation.
As a young girl, how aware were you of your father's service and what was going on?
In my younger years, maybe not so much aware, it just became a way of life. But when we moved to Europe, they had some activities and demonstrations going on over there, and I remember them, the command where we were stationed, they passed on an order that we had to kind of stay, we couldn't go to outside activities, we had to stay within the base confines, and basically shop on base, we couldn't shop out in town, things like that. Then I became more aware, because Americans were getting killed, so they were protecting us. So.
And as time went on, how hard was it for your husband and father to leave?
It was never easy, especially when they had kids and we have kids, and it's always a difficult thing to do. So communication became a big part of what we look forward to. How do we keep in touch? How do we write? In the beginning, it wasn't necessarily as easy because electronics weren't where they are right now. You didn't have email and things like that. So we did mail drops and familygrams, and they would tell you where to drop your letters off at what time, what date. And then as emails came along, then it became a lot better because you can communicate more frequently and not necessarily have the delay between getting the letter and sending the letter.
So overall, how did you enjoy your military experience?
I had an incredible 21 years. I was stationed in some incredible spots. I got to travel all over the world. The hard times were minimum and the good times were better. So it was nothing but a success for me.
I have to agree. I wouldn't change a thing. I tell people that the recruiters have to promise somebody all the good deals, and I think I had them, so.
I can share in that opinion. I feel I had some very good duty stations, the work that I did. I had one regret, and that was at the end of my service, I was being dictated by World War II senior officers and enlisted men. And I was middle management and had to dictate to, let's say, young people of the 60s who had totally different ideas. And being in middle management at that time was a little bit of a hard time. So much so that I decided not to continue my service. I got out after my 6 years.
So that was my next question, is how and why you decided to leave the service. So was that your reason why?
Well, my reason was, first of all, I wanted to go back and go to college and get into the mainstream. But part of the point was I was in charge of an electric shop, and it was just very difficult being in the middle at that time. So the two reasons.
And what about yourself? What was the reason you decided to retire?
After getting back from being deployed for Iraqi freedom, my 3 boys were 4, 6, and 8 at that time. And my civilian job as a firefighter had me away nights and weekends. And as the shop chief at the Guard, I had to work more than 1 weekend a month. And it was time for me to be home. And I had 21 years in. I thought I would step down, give up my slot so somebody else could get promoted, which is how it worked in the Guard. And retire and have that part of my life behind me and be home with my wife and sons.
And yourself?
Well, my career path was backseat of the F-4 Phantom, and the Marines didn't get the F-14, which also had a backseat. Instead, they got the F-18, which did not. And I felt pretty certain that the Marines would find something for me to do, but I didn't really, want a make-work position. So I got out.
And just as a wrap-up question, what would you say to a Hale-Ray student considering joining the service?
I'm all for it. I would say if it's possible and you see a college path, either work towards an ROTC position or start college, preferably 4-year college, and look at OCS and go into the military as an officer. While I was able to rise through the ranks, being a junior enlisted person is very hard and demanding, and you don't make a lot of money, and you're not treated with such respect. And so if you could see that path, I would always encourage somebody to go into OCS or ROTC.
Well, I have to agree. I think the service offers many great opportunities for people. Given the current state of world affairs, the risk is greater than it was during my time. I would also concur that OCS is the military academy, or some of the other branches to become an officer would be the preferred choice. Additional responsibilities, additional career opportunities, and you don't have to deal with being a junior enlisted man.
Well, I share your thoughts exactly, except for the fact that, as I stated earlier, I really wasn't ready for college. I think when I got out of the service, I was making the same money as an officer who was just going in. As an E5 enlisted man, an officer straight out of school was making the same salary. So from a fiscal point of view, it's a tremendous opportunity to become an officer. If you're not ready for that, I feel that the opportunities for people the opportunities given to people in the service, making you a much more worldly and aware person. I feel it helped me when I did get finally into school. Admittedly, I was 6 years older than most of the other freshmen, but my attitudes were totally different than they would have been straight out of high school. So the advantage, if you can, certainly, I think the officer program is the best way to go, and if you can't do that, the service is a wonderful opportunity for travel and for just expanding your horizons.
And for a person in the same position that you are, either with their parent or spouse being in the military, what's one piece of advice you'd give to them how to cope, I guess?
Be flexible and enjoy the ride.
So I'd like to thank you all for your service, and I hope you continue to get the same respect every day as you're getting today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.